Hello, I'm Martin Kelly of Friends Journal, and with me today for a video chat is Micah Bales. Micah Bales wrote an article in our March issue called Free Ministry for All. So thanks for coming here, Micah.
Thanks for having me.
Great. So your article talks about why Quakers historically have not had paid ministries. Tell us a little bit how that started. Why do we have that situation?
Well, in the time period that Friends were emerging and becoming a movement, the biggest paid ministry was the Church of England's clerical system, and those folks were supported by state tithes, which was basically like a church tax. And unlike tithes that you'll see in many churches today, which are voluntary, tithes in the Church of England at that time were not voluntary, and so a lot of people, even people that didn't agree with the politics or theology of the Church of England, were forced to pay tithes to the church. So when the Quaker movement was first getting off the ground, having to pay tithes to support, first of all, a ministry that folks didn't agree with, but second of all, a ministry that not only did many folks not agree with, but really had doubts that it was even genuine ministry. Many of the clergy in the Church of England were sort of second sons of landed nobility, and they weren't able to take over their family's estate, so as kind of a runner-up prize, they got to be a priest or a bishop, and it was a very lucrative line of work. And so the early Quaker movement really reacted against ministry as a line of work, ministry as a paid profession, just like any other, and said, no, Jesus has told us that we've received the gospel freely, and so we need to give it freely. And ministry of the gospel isn't just a line of work; it's a holy calling that we do because God calls us to, and not just because we need to make a living.
Sure. Well, a lot has changed, of course, in 300 years. A lot has changed for Quakers and also for the world. We don't have the landed gentry and forced tithes and all that. What is a free gospel ministry that the Quakers talked about? How does that work today, and how doesn't it work?
Well, so in theory, particularly in unprogrammed meetings where there's not a paid pastor, the benefits of a free gospel ministry is that ideally everyone is called to act out of their gifts and to share their gifts with the meeting and with the whole community. And because everyone is freed up to share their gifts freely, there's not sort of there's not a dominating personality. There's not an individual or individuals who are sort of put in a position of being professional Quakers, but instead everyone gives according to their gifts, and everyone receives from the meeting according to how they need to be spoken to as well. So ideally, when everyone is contributing, fully, the meeting can operate without having individuals be professionalized as professional Quakers. So that's the ideal, and unfortunately, it doesn't always work out that way. I think many of us have experienced. Well, actually, I would just point to sort of a secular example to start with of sort of what the drawbacks are to having a totally non-paid ministry. In one organization that I was a part of, we were working to stop foreclosures and evictions here in Washington, D.C., where I live, and we were working really hard, and we were all volunteers, and most of us had full-time jobs on top of the volunteer work we were doing in this really intense organization where we were trying to do community organizing, basically. But we never got clear together to establish ourselves as an organization that would have staff or that would in any way free up space in people's lives to take on this community organizing work as a full-time or even a part-time calling, rather than just sort of something on the side. And what inevitably happened in that case was we got bogged down and lost energy over time as our paying jobs, the jobs that were paying the rent and paying our grocery bills, demanded more and more from us. We burned out, and we weren't able to sustain the kind of energy level and focus that we needed for the work, helping people stay in their homes. So I've seen a similar thing happen in a lot of Quaker meetings where we all really believe in the ministry that the meeting is called to. We all really want to share from our gifts, but at the end of the day, in our present mindset, our paid work takes priority. If it's between volunteering on Saturday for a project that my meeting's doing and showing up for a work meeting that's obligatory, and I might get fired if I don't attend this meeting, I'm going to go to the work meeting, and not only will I go to the work meeting, but people in my meeting will say, yes, you absolutely should go to that meeting because we can't support you if you're unemployed. You got to pay your own freight. So it's understood that we all need to be supporting ourselves. We all need to be out in the marketplace making money so that we're not a burden on anyone else.
Right, which is a lot harder, even more difficult perhaps today than hundreds of years ago, where the communities were sort of structured differently in economics. We didn't have college loans to worry about and all sorts of other bills.
Right.
In your article, sort of towards the end, you ask what it would look like to take our testimony of free gospel ministry to the next levels. What might that look like?
Well, I think that our testimony of free gospel ministry is essentially rooted in an apocalyptic worldview, and I'm going to unpack what that means, because the word apocalypse, most people just think of like nuclear bombs going off and the world ending.
Sure.
But as for those who are familiar, Doug Gwynn and Lewis Benson and others have written about Quakerism, especially the early Quaker movement, as being a profoundly apocalyptic movement. And apocalypse meaning, it's a Greek word, apocalypsis, which means to reveal or to remove the veil from something so we can see what's actually going on behind the scenes. And Doug Gwynn and Benson and others have written about Quakerism as a fundamentally prophetic faith, and the role of prophecy isn't necessarily just to tell the future, it's actually to tell the present and to reveal to apocalypse what is actually happening behind the scenes in our culture. The early Quaker movement was profoundly engaged in a prophetic movement that sought to show people what was really going on behind the scenes and how Christ was at work in their day and age. And they had a sense that Christ was imminent and that he was present and working, and that in a sense kingdom come was coming. And because of that, there wasn't the same emphasis on on self-preservation, on maintaining a status quo, on maintaining security going decades in the future. We're all encouraged to plan for retirement. Early Quakers in that first generation, they weren't very worried about retirement planning. They really thought that Jesus was going to reestablish his kingdom on earth. And a part of that reestablishment was a radical economic reordering where we didn't just work for money. We actually worked for God, and God provided for us. So I think we have, to put it in stark terms, I think we have two main options that we can pick from as a religious movement today. Quakers can pick either to continue in the path that we've been going in for the last while and continue to get closer and closer ideologically to an understanding of economics as being, well, I work and then I receive payment for my work, and there's this quid pro quo relationship where I receive my just rewards for doing the work that I'm paid to do. That's sort of a market understanding of, well, I get paid because I produce value for other people, and other people reward me for the value that I produce. Another way of understanding economics that fits better with the early Quaker understanding of free gospel ministry is that God has given me and God has given our community gifts, and we're responsible to use those to glorify God. And as we use our gifts to glorify God, God will continue to give us what we need each day, as Jesus teaches us to pray in the Lord's Prayer, give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. So when we're living in an apocalyptic worldview, in a prophetic worldview, the worldview of early friends, when we're living in the state of give us today our daily bread and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors, we no longer think in terms of well, here's what I've earned, and here's what I have a right to, and here's what I've established for myself. But instead, we think in terms of gift, and here's what God has given us as a community, and how can we share this gift with others. So, what I suggest in the article that I wrote for Friends Journal is that for a long time, as we've left this apocalyptic understanding and moved into more of a market understanding of our ministry, the only people that have really been required to maintain that apocalyptic mindset, that mindset of I'm going to live for God today, not for my own self-interest or my own imagined self-interest tomorrow. Only ministers have been required to live in that, or to attempt to live in that prophetic imagination. What I wanted in my article to invite us into as a religious society of friends is to consider what would it look like for all of us, regardless of whether we're called to full-time ministry or not. And when I say full-time ministry, I mean the sort of public ministry of traveling and preaching and pastoral care in a local meeting, but the level of ministry that would really preclude full-time work.
A time-intensive ministry.
Right.
Yeah.
So because we all have a ministry that we're engaged in, regardless of our professional lives. But what I wanted to suggest with my article is what would it look like to shift the idea of free gospel ministry broader to all of us, even if you're a medical doctor or a lawyer or an investment banker, whoever you are, making a lot of money. What if all of us considered all the gifts we've received, whether money or not, as gifts and not as something that we've earned by our own prowess? But what if we considered that God had given us all these things, and how would that change our perspective? How would we be motivated to share the gifts with others? So just as say the gospel minister is expected to give the gift of gospel ministry freely, what if the medical doctor is expected to give medical treatment freely, or the lawyer legal counsel freely? What would that look like?
Yeah, it's a very radical challenge to how we do economics and how our society wants us to do economics. Well, thank you very much, Micah. And it looks like my video side has frozen here, but again, you can go online, friendsjournal.org, and this is one of the articles that we have up for free. It's Micah Bale's Free Ministry for All, and you can find it in the March 2014 issue. Thank you very much, Micah, for being with us.
Thank you for having me.